Welcome to Costly Conversations. My name is Aaron, and I'm super excited because today we have a very special guest, somebody who is making waves in the Second Amendment community for potentially being the next Elon Musk of 2A of the gun community. Now, somebody might say that's a lofty title. Is that hyperbole? Is that a little bit of clickbait? Good question. Maybe a little bit. I mean, you be the judge. But I want to discuss exactly how she is leveraging her position as somebody who's worked in tech. Somebody might say big tech, but I think maybe she might rebuttal that to make the gun training community a little bit better, a little bit more accessible, because that's a big deal, making it more accessible to those who want to get involved. And how she's doing that, who she's leveraging, who she's working with, who she's not working with, how her background makes this thing really run, and maybe where she might have a more limited background in guns, uh, how can she kind of improve in those ways? All these questions, I have them all, and she's going to answer them, hopefully, right? And let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go. April, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Aaron, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, listen,
What?
for those who cannot see, you just have the dopest background. Um, it because most people don't do video podcast and whatnot, so they're not accustomed to having like really clean like backgrounds with the New York skyline in the back, and it's just like if you're not watching, you should just hop over just so you can see it because it is super nice.
Oh, thank you. It's actually San Diego, but
Excuse me. Wow, look at me. Just
no, no, that's
knowing
okay. I
my
mean, beautiful
skylines, right?
skylines everywhere, but yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I in my past, I did a lot of webinars and a lot of video, like educational stuff. So here I am.
Right. And it seems like you're kind of continuing in that vein of video education with the training arena. That's what your brand or your business is called. Uh, Like,
Mhm.
can we just talk about that a little bit? Like, what is the mission of the training arena? Because I know I mentioned it like very briefly, but tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, Training Arena is going to be an online platform for education, and this is just for anything preparation. We started with medical, right, with Grizzly Medical on TCCC medication, things that you can actually learn and maybe also buy online. Now, it does not replicate like an actual in-person class to experience how it is, right? Like same thing as holding a gun or any other like online can never really replace in-person things, but one of the barriers of entry that I've heard and learned is they don't know who to listen to and who to follow, who's vetted, and then also they don't want to come out looking stupid when they come into a class. And so training arena is really focused on giving everyone the tool to explore, discover, and just kind of learn and expand upon their education. Or if they took a real life class, usually these classes give you so much information. We work with these instructors to kind of give them a recap, if not a little bit more instruction at the end. So that's also the benefit of Training Arena. So we hope to be kind of a masterclass of the tactical world.
Fair. Masterclass would be, I suppose, like the comp if we want to say, like, hey, you can go on here, find a course or a class on something that is meaningful or impactful to you. For, obviously with Masterclass, you might learn video editing or speaking from Bob Iger, or, which commercial am I referencing, from which YouTuber
Yeah.
pushing that platform. But who do you feel is your customer with that brand, with the training arena? Is it regular guys like myself who are, because for those who don't know, I'm pretty regular, like I'm nothing extraordinary, I'm not some operator, right? Or is it, do you hope that businesses or first responders will, tap in to do their annual refreshers on your course, or your platform rather, for such like the TCCC side? Like, who do you hope this will reach most?
Yeah. Specifically for TCCC, actually they require you to have it in person, right? So this is actually like kind of a refresher and or a start for them. However, we are like it's everyone, anyone. So I do like you have people who are regular people like you and I, right? We're civilians in the world. You also have people who are military, and when you talk to military, it's just because they're in the military, it doesn't mean that they've actually worked with multiple platforms, right? If you are a CISO for a C-130, it doesn't actually mean like you might be MQualified for, one or two firearms, but even then, you're not learning gunfighting, you're not learning room clearing, you're not learning, foraging mushrooms or TCCC medication, right? In the same way that maybe a PJ in an Air Force would learn a little bit more. However, if you're a police officer, Dan, one of our instructors, the first one we launched with, he there's a lot of first responders, whether you're like a firefighter or a police officer, who actually hasn't had experiences putting on a tourniquet. So we do work with many different groups. Training Arena does have two sides to it. So we do have a public side that is open to everyone, and then we also have a private sector one. So um, uh, if you have clearance, then those classes are made for you. So
Excellent. Well, for just one moment, I'd like to pause and just welcome the people who are watching online, because this is a live podcast. For those who are listening on audio, we did this live, and of course, we're going to present it after the fact to you guys. There's a few of you guys watching, and somebody dropped a comment, and I think it's hilarious, from a Burnt Nugget, faithful viewer, who said, "Why does it feel like we're talking with a special agent of MI6?" Good question. I think it's the leather jacket. Do you agree, or you're just so well spoken? He said.
well, thank you. Thank you. No, I'm just a big fan of leather jackets.
Fair, fair. So,
I mean, I can't admit anything if that was the case. No, I'm just kidding. I'm from tech. I really am from
yeah, that's her cover story, right? Because what do they say? Anybody in the CIA, like if you're really working for CIA, they don't even say the CIA; they just say CIA. Or
tech. I think
according to that one guy
the
who's just floating
Department
around
of
the internet,
Defense.
Department of Defense. Yeah,
They
I
work
know
for
a
the
few people.
DoD.
DoD. Have you ever contracted with DoD?
In the oh my gosh. Yeah, actually, it was a company called Alelo. We built apps. This is when I was like 18 years old. I was a UX designer for one of the first mobile apps that was deployed, where I was a contractor for them. And, you know, the iPhone had just kind of, I'm dating myself, but the iPhone had just like come out a few, like within like the first 3 years. And we were making like flashcards online so you can like learn, and it'd be like salam alaikum, and you're like learning languages
Wow.
on there. But it was a company called Alelo down at like Marina del Rey. So that is the closest thing I've ever been to the DoD.
Okay, fair. I appreciate you sharing that story. That is interesting. Like the very first Duolingo, like before that
Yeah,
was a thing, right?
before that
So
was a thing.
before it was cool. Let's get kind of back to your story, because I know when I posted like, hey, uh, the current working title of this show is something like, um, here it is in front of me: Big Tech is helping gun nuts? Question mark. And you actually reposted it and you said, "Hey guys, now keep in mind the title's a little sensational," and I agree, it is. That's the point, right? But in
We got you here.
we got yeah, you're here, right? Excuse me. No, but you did respond and say like, guys, it's a little sensational, but we are going to talk about it. And then we kind of had a little bit of dialogue back and forth saying like, hey, big tech is actually really well known for these things. And these are the things we would like to avoid in being a resource to the Second Amendment community and to the civilian defense community, if you will. In
Yeah.
what way would you say what you do is part of the tech and big tech sphere? And in what ways would you say it's opposite, it's counter, it's antithetical?
Yeah, so big tech is awesome because they bring a lot of innovation, right? Things like having these things online, right? Streaming, like we're on YouTube right now. Obviously, when you think of big tech, you think of like FANG, right? The Facebooks or Meta now, Apples, and Netflix slash like Nvidias of the world and Google, um, and they really push innovation in the last decade. The one thing about big tech that I like that kind of scares me by saying that we're, big tech. Two things: we are actually leveraging technology that's already here in Silicon Valley, and that I'm working with partners and platforms that can help already, like off the shelf platforms that are actually helping people download these courses, right, or see these courses and stuff. So yeah, we are using technology in that way. I will say that big tech tends to gather and monetize data through user interface, which is actually, it's almost like a California moving to Idaho, right? Like you don't really want to change Idaho. And the like, to elaborate on that, um, you know, the 2A community, for what it's worth, is a little bit secretive in terms of data. And there's a reason why we don't actually like want to share what guns we have, what types of systems you have, because ultimately everyone has the rights to protect themselves and their family members. And if the government understands exactly how many which you have, which actually technically with California you do, right, with droves, but you can see other parts of the state where people are more I wouldn't say secretive, but like government shouldn't know, right? And they see it as government overstep, to have a list of all the type of firearms you own and everything else too. And so, um, I actually, with Training Arena, we were just talking to our lawyers earlier last week, and they're like, okay, what data information are you going to be collecting? And I'm like, as little as I can possibly. Like, I am working on obviously making sure that there's the right credentials, and we're also making sure that this is not for bad actors. At the same time, we are actively trying to scrub the data. There are what we're trying not to leverage the data as much as possible and just allow people to learn from our platform, just in the spirit of 2A.
Yeah, well, I mean that's great, and appreciate your desire and your perspective. It is also interesting because, like you said, data is such a valuable thing, to the end user, to the collector. When I say end user, the person being collected on, and then the collector of the data. You can use it for advertising. You can use it to better understand who your clients are and reach more clients like these people, and demographics information and everything like that. And that's generally the demographics. Oh, like, that's fine. Like, to know exactly what kind of clients you have, but um, where I am, I'm just like, man, like, in what way are you missing out? Like, what are you sacrificing by saying, I don't want to overstep and break trust in the 2A community by, collecting all this data, kind of being almost what somebody might consider like a Trojan horse. Like, oh, if I give my data to Amber and people know that I've done a virtual door kicking class, am I going to be on a watch
Yeah,
list? Like, who's going to be able to access this? If the FBI comes to Amber and says, hey, who all is going to your course? Like, is she just going to give it up? Is it going to be like Liberty Safes, who, when law enforcement went to Liberty Safe, they gave up codes for their
exactly.
users? Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point. So, actually, that's that is actually one of the case studies as to why I'm doing everything I can in terms of like, okay, if someone like, let's say Amber or whatever, like ends up buying a course, I mostly just like, okay, what information do I really need from you? That just might be your email address, might be your thing, and if you're it depends. Some people have their whole lives connected to one email. Um, but some of those tech savvier people might, hey, we're gonna just buy this and this is it. I am sacrificing a lot. I am. it would be so much easier if I knew exactly where that person is, their IP address. Like I could look at like, their if I was able to look at exactly where people are purchasing things, then I can do so much more, right? I can target. I mean, literally, my job in tech for a while was, being the chief marketing officer. So my whole job was stalking online, like not like per person, but looking at trends and then saying, all right, now we could push this product this way, right? And yeah, so I'm sacrificing the growth of Training Arena in order to actually hide as much of the, or like scrub as much of the information as possible. Some of the things that we are going to keep is like user data, as in like emails, and
Mhm.
we are using Stripe for some of our purchasing. So if they have the credit card, it doesn't even go through my platform. It goes through Stripe themselves, but then people use Apple to like Apple Pay to pay or whatever like that too.
Sure.
So it doesn't, like, ultimately I don't see it. So if they ask me, I just provide the emails. Sometimes it's first name last name alongside with the emails, but even then we try and scrub it. And I am sacrificing, like, if I, in the ideal world, early on when we were talking about building this organization, I was like, okay, well, I mean, if we know that you're going to take like class A, C, and D, we could potentially offer you class B, right?
Mhm.
But even then, I feel that is too much because looking at knowing that type of information and that type of data, I'm like, well, yeah, but these people, like, I just want it where if they can log into the platform through their
Yeah.
logins and their password, then
And That's
like they can choose on their own.
that's
And
very
I'm really
noble, and
just
I
trying to make a
appreciate that.
resource for it.
Yeah. Well, here's the question that I have, just as somebody who's just analyzing the situation. And I know you have a story, a very intense story of kind of what sent you down this path. Most of the time, you don't. I don't just run into random Asian ladies at the gym, or at the range rather. At the gym, yes. Range, no.
Yeah.
So, in regards to demographics, you are somewhat of a rarity. Somebody who's interested in firearms, especially somebody who's a part of the I guess the ecological structure of the Second Amendment community. You don't see it a lot. It's mostly, I hate to say it, older white dudes, some black dudes, a few Asian guys, especially in like the competition scene, because
Yeah.
it is what it is. But you are a rarity, and so I want to know what was your canon event that kind of brought you into this space. And then after we get through talking about kind of what brought you in, and I know that's kind of a deeper, a heavy story. I would like to ask a few more questions regarding the business plan for this thing because uh, I got
Yeah,
questions.
absolutely.
So let's talk
Oh,
about
absolutely. Oh
let's
man,
talk about what you
we're here
brought.
for a while, so let's
Yeah, I
talk.
mean we're technically here for like hour 15 minutes, and then we're gonna head over to locals and talk about aliens or something. I'm not sure. So
Perfect. Oh, I love talking about aliens. So I would say there was a few turning points for me getting into the firearms community. The first one was, yeah, you can safely assume where I stood about firearms being in San Francisco most of my life. Um, I didn't have to actually travel. I didn't have to go anywhere. And then, when I moved over to Pensacola, Florida for a little while, um, I was like, oh, I could build an AR and I can learn about this. And I'm like, but I really don't want to. And I didn't actually really see the need at the time. Again, being in San Francisco, where if I called the cops, like they're down the street, literally, and being a um, Asian woman, just saying like calling them, they would help, right? It, and even then, maybe 30 seconds is too late. Some would argue. So, anyways, that said, my husband at the time wanted a firearm, and he wanted to. He was going to get deployed soon, so he just said, "Hey, you know what? I need to be getting, or I need range time a little bit more." So we ended up buying a pistol, um, and then also, we built an AR, and that's when he taught me basically the gun mechanics. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if you don't pull the trigger, then it's not going to just automatically explode on you, right? Growing up as a kid, you were thinking like, okay, well, if someone, um, at least growing up as a kid, when they said, hey, if you see a firearm, talk to an adult. Well, I'm an adult. Like, what do I do with this firearm, right? Um, so now I felt a little bit more comfortable, but I was like, okay, if we're gonna have a fire in the house, then I'm gonna have to like maybe go to the range here and there a little bit, just to. I felt like it was a responsibility that I needed to do, especially if I were to start a family, right? And and so I went on the range and shooting in isosceles, learning the four safety rules and all that type of stuff. But it really wasn't really my jam. Fast forward 2 years after that, I my uh, my husband had a hunting trip that he insisted that I would go to. And the people who know me in life, like I love. There's two things I love in life. Like I love animals, but I also love to eat animals. Um, don't kill me, PETA, or PETA. But like,
Listen,
I
I hate to interrupt, but the amount of and like just rabid vegans that I've run into on Instagram recently, just people having a nice plate of like, oh, I'm having some ribs. And people are like, yeah, you would do that to an animal? Would you do that to a person too? I'm just like, chill, give me a break. Oh
I
my
mean, if they're
god.
tasty, I'm kidding. I'm
Oh
kidding.
my god. Chilling.
No, I'm
I
joking.
don't
I'm joking.
know. Okay, I'm gonna let you finish. So
No,
hunting trip.
yeah. So we were at a hunting trip, and and then here's the thing. Like I'm, I was absolutely against. Like I was like, okay, how this hunting trip was for turkey, and I was like, how are we going to use every part of the turkey? Okay, we're gonna make stock with it, sausages for certain parts, and I'm like, okay, fine. We have a deal of like what we're gonna do with the turkey. All right, fine. I'll go on this hunting trip. Um, and breaking all the safety rules. And again, being someone who's like an add-on, like it was my husband's friend, right? And I was like the wife of the husband, and I just didn't, I don't know, I felt really uncomfortable the whole time. But um this guy, the guide, who was also like the RSO, for us, he was like drinking early on. I'm like, this seems kind of sketchy, like. But either way, we just like he was fine majority of the time. And then as the night progresses, and actually, we successfully hunted a turkey. Um, I actually, you know, we were getting ready for dinner, and I remember the host, like the host, all went to like the back of the room showering. My this guy's like the person's wife actually went to bed a little bit earlier. This was like really late at night. And my husband was like also, getting ready to go to bed. He was also showering in a different room. So I was sitting on the couch and I was on Instagram just because, vapid or whatever. Um, and in the corner of my eye, I was on the couch, and on the corner of my eye, the guy had approached me. I didn't realize this, but we were shooting shotguns this whole time prior, but there was a 1911 pointed next to my head, um, and I just kind of looked like to the side, and I see this gun, and he racks it, and I remember thinking to myself like, "Fuck, I should have said something," and also, I think I'm gonna die today. Uh, and then he pulls the trigger. Luckily, there's nothing inside. Um, but yeah, uh, I had thought that like my life was going to end that day. Um, so fast forward, got myself out of that situation. And then when I talked to, and this is a sad, shameful part of like, our marriage with my husband. But when I had like talked to him, I said, hey, your friend did this thing and you should be pissed. Um, and he's like, well, don't tell me how I feel. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I just almost, I feel like I almost died. And he goes, but you didn't die. And I'm like, okay. Like the man that, I had decided to be with, decided not to become a protector. Even like however way you want to perceive it, turns out the gun was actually empty. So, technically, say breaking all like multiple rules of firearm safety. Either way, I hearing that really broke my heart,
Yeah.
which also led to a separation. Or one of the reasons why it led to a separation. However, it really changed my mind, and like my framework moving forward of like I am actually my own first responder moving forward. Like I cannot depend on others. And like, again, having that chance, within those 2 years of moving from Pensacola to New Mexico to back to California, I saw the reasons why everywhere else in America, like why, sorry, and I'm kind of jumping between topics, but I know why it is important for other communities to actually have guns, right? And other
Hmm.
than like these urban, um, super dense areas, like I was living in a nice place, considerably nice, in the outskirts in the suburbs of San Francisco, and there's no reason why we needed, or there wasn't a reason why we needed it growing up. So I was like, well, I don't understand why we needed firearms, but moving to different parts of the country, yeah, of course you do. You absolutely do. Like there may not be like the response times aren't enough, and even 3 minutes of a response time is never enough.
Yeah.
Hell, what am I supposed to do when someone's putting a gun right to my head when he just like walks by there? I didn't even know what he was doing. Again, I was stupidly on my phone, right?
Hmm.
And not being aware of my surroundings. And so, um, like, am I supposed to call 911 at that time? Like, oh, by the way, my friend's, my husband's friend is pointing a gun to my head. Like, what are they going to do at that time?
Right.
Right. So, um, I do believe it's like the great equalizer. And also, it's just like being capable and like learning, being a little bit more self aware of everything that's around you.
Hmm.
Um, so then I got into that mentality. And shortly afterwards, I started trying to follow. Um, the gun world is intimidating, um, to start going
Yeah.
through. I think early on when we were talking about like when we first interacted, and I think I randomly followed you, back in like May of 2022. And that was actually, so what that instance happened around, like, I think it was like March or April of that year.
Wow.
Um, Coincidentally, circling back, yeah, anyways, I actually launched Training Arena on the day this guy goes to jail for something else. So, a little bit of a
Wow.
vendetta and a little full circle here. So I'm
That's
actually really proud
incredible.
of like this journey that I've gone through. I don't want to give too much credit of this guy
Right.
starting this aspect of my life, but
Well,
um,
you had
yeah.
decisions to make, and I hate to interrupt you because you're telling a really powerful story, and I'm super thankful because you could have chose to skip through some of those gory details because it's clearly still difficult to think about and to picture yourself in this place where your life was in the balance. Obviously, this man was drinking a lot. And he's doing extremely dangerous, extremely negligent things, and people have died for
Yeah.
less. And so it hurts me just as a husband to a wife and a father to daughters that your husband didn't respond in a way to at least to understand how you were feeling. And obviously you've had to deal with that with him, and it's not great, but also to consider that, hey, um, you are faced with some realities. This is a pivotal moment. Like I said earlier, like a canon event. You can go left, you can go right. Are you going to say, guns are traumatizing? I don't want everyone to see a gun again. I'm going to get rid of all my guns. I actually had a family member who had a negligent discharge and got rid of all his guns. He was a former Marine. No one got hurt. Fired in the air. Well, I think no one got hurt. But for you, quite the opposite. You started to
Hmm.
kind of more understand and leverage the power that you had from based on your past experiences to build something to help you, or the person like you, right? That's what it seems
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like, well, and that was the start of it. But
Okay.
jumping, like learning, uh, taking my first firearm class actually, and our first and second one. Um, First off, it was really intimidating. Like going online, trying to see like, okay, do people really know what they're talking about? Like this guy was, kind of our RSO, right? He was our gun expert, and yet he's the one who's pointed a gun at me. So like, and there's a lot of people like that, and we probably know a lot of like, said instructors that are actually like, oof, they really shouldn't be doing that. And going online, I couldn't find and like trust resources right away. I'd had to like really vet and say like, okay, are these people really good? Like, I the first thing I did was, I talked to one person. And it's rare in my community to know who is actually a gun owner and who isn't, right? Like owning guns in this part of like San Francisco and openly talking about it has its pros and cons. I've recently lost a lot of friends by being so open about the training arena.
Why?
Even like work networks, because it's very divisive here, especially in San Francisco.
As someone who grew up in
Um,
it, can you kind of explain to the red-blooded, overall wearing American, why it's actually device? Are we introducing pain, or are we saying that we're Trump voters? By it's like, what exactly does gun ownership and responsible gun ownership communicate to somebody who declines to do so?
yeah. I mean, here, right? Like where I was living in it, we're lucky. Oh, this could be like a topic by itself, right? Like how people see it. Like again, cops are just down the street of where I'm at. But then there's some unfortunate communities where, and I say unfortunate, it's like they can't trust the cops to actually defend them, right? That itself was like a national topic, um, all the time, especially recently, right?
Right.
And even with the diversity that we have here, um, it's it's easy. Yeah, sure. In the whole like in the world of like, I get a lot of like, oh well, this country removed all the guns and now there's no guns and stuff, and it's like, okay, yeah, but bad people are going to do bad things regardless. And also, at the end of the day, no matter what, this is a Second Amendment right, and the cat's been out of the bag for 200 plus years. We chose as Americans to um, have guns in our community. You know, there's no way we can take away every gun, everything. And if anything, we're going to be left defenseless. If we started a country where there was none of it to begin with, then that is the thing. But it's in our history, it's in our thing. So um, I think when San Franciscans talk about it and they have this divisiveness, a lot of it is actually that they're not around this culture. The closest outdoor gun range near me is about an hour away. And the range, like indoor ranges, are being shut down left and right, especially like after COVID, time period here. So there's not a lot of training, and they just didn't grow up with it. As I said, like, hey, if you find a gun, go talk to an adult. Like that was, what we were taught growing up. Versus, the environment where, you hear these stories of like, oh, the son and the father goes out hunting and, teaches the firearm safety when they're like 5 or 6, and they understand and they respect the firearms. Then there's so many guns in the nation, and yet the percentage of actually it's actually pretty low in comparison, right? Like compared to how much gun owners there are. But I don't really want to jump into the whole like
Sure.
politics. I am not a very smart person when it comes to that part. But
Hey,
I
well,
will say
there's a
that,
lot to know. Yeah.
mhm. What I will say is, because I have been an advocate where I'm actually very loud about gun ownership these days and also the
Mhm.
safety of guns. I do get a lot of, um, and this is the somewhat crazy part about it is I, I am very fortunate that I have gone through a lot of training in the last year and a half, and I was almost shooting once a week, and like working with ranges and trying to be as educated as possible. Now, what's crazy about it is, I launched and talked about this company back in the like mid-January, around when SHOT Show happened, and the amount of tech executives and old colleagues that reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm just learning firearms now, or I want to get into it, but I don't know who to talk to." I'm like, well, thankfully, you could talk to me about it, and I can get you on to a USCCA or an NRA instructor that I
Yeah.
personally trust and recommend. But I was almost going to jump in on this first example where
Yeah.
the first time I said, "Okay, I'm going to go into this journey now," I went. I'm not going to name names, but I went to this one girl that I knew had a gun, and I was like, "Hi, who should I train with?" And she goes, "You really need to work with this one guy." And I'm like, "Cool. All right, awesome." And then I was like, "Wait a minute. His credentials don't really check out. He says he's an NRA member, but then or he's an NRA instructor, but then he wasn't in the database." And
Hmm.
like, I'm crazy. I vet everyone in the like in the background on that. I don't think
Why
everyone
should you
generally does.
though?
They'll take it for the word, right? Like
Yeah.
you,
I mean,
yeah, you would believe it. He does online classes and stuff. And then later on, as I went with a different school, but then I followed this guy that I had the first recommendation, the best person in this industry, and there was an article about him like a year or so later that he went to Ukraine and accidentally um, perform some medical stuff even though he wasn't actually like qualified to do it, and his gun methods are a joke. And so he would flag people and all this stuff, like he would flag people and say, oh, okay, well, but it's cleared, and then they just put like blue duct tape and said like this is it. And I'm like, oh wow, like this was the guy that through a climbing friend said this guy's legit. I'm like, well,
right.
you may be a good climber, but clearly you're not good at vetting your your gun instructors.
Right.
I mean, I
I'm
love her to death,
trying
but
to put these dots
that's
together. So when you first got started, obviously people started alienating you. You were searching for instructors, couldn't find instructors, were searching for people. Did your background, did you do due diligence? Because that's the personality type that you have. The type to start a whole business based on these things is the type of person who's going to do their job or do their diligence rather, and say like, okay, so who's this person? What are the reviews saying? What are people saying? Are there any articles about them? What's their training montage look like? Like, are they in a database? And it seemed like
yeah.
person after person, you were being let down. Is that what kind of pushed you to start your own thing where you can vet these people that you can present, or were there other examples of times where you were looking for help and it's just like duds, like what where
Yeah, I
does this
mean, in the
take
very
you?
beginning, it was definitely like duds. And there was a lot of duds. And then I was like trying to find online um, who everyone else would recommend, close by. And then looking at, diverse partners and people that were not so, like, to me, felt like, oh my gosh, like they were very, very 2A enthusiastic, right? Like I just like I knew I was like this person just kind of coming into it. And so having these like calmer leaders actually kind of talk about guns in a way where it's like, okay, you're not stupid for knowing this stuff. Let's go do this. And then I actually met Dan, who runs the medical side, but he's actually a firearms instructor, and he's like a killer, great like oh my gosh, I can't think right now, but he shoots really fast, and steel target challenge like under like 3 seconds, 2.66 or something like that in a recent competition that he was in. Um, and and he actually taught me like malfunctions and reiterated. And when I told him that story of and I told him a story of like, hey, I'm really scared of firearms and stuff. He's like, hey, work with this group and this training group that I was working with. And then there I met like a scout sniper for the USMC, and he was also teaching here. So I was like, I am still uncomfortable with my gun. What can I do? And every time I told the story that someone was being negligent and pointed the gun, they're like, we don't own him. Like, this is terrible. Like, no, we wouldn't accept that. We would kick you out of the range instantly. And I found this like embracing community, even though, again, I probably had different views than many of them. They were so sweet to me. Um, and these guys just kind of like put me under their wings. This the scout sniper, his name's Evan, and he spent hours with me, just like working on my pistol, like comfortability. Dan, who kind of walked me through all the malfunctions, and Brandon, who also trained brain like trains dogs. These guys were all in the same training school, and they like this guy, taught me how to actually clean my guns, and took the time to really foster this community of like safety for me. And I felt, not only competent, but they would bring me on for like a year and a half through all their adventures. And I learned how to shoot like long range within the like third or fourth. Yeah, it was like the third time I went out to even touch a long gun. I shot a mile, which was extremely magical, right? Like it was a 1 point or 1083 yards on a 308, which is rated for 1200 yards.
That's
So
awesome.
it was magical for me, and like to
Yeah.
kind of have these guys that were very patient with me. And then like just knowing that um, Dan and both Evan were service members in the past, right? And they were like trying to build a brand for themselves. Um, and actually, this kind of leads on to like why Training Arena at the end of the day is ultimately like they have these brands that they've already built themselves, and yet these guys are not marketers. These guys are not they're
Hmm.
not technologists. They don't,
Right.
they just want to like build their classes at the end of the day.
Yeah. Most of the
And
best
and I
instructors are
saw,
terrible at marketing.
well, they should be terrible at marketing. Like marketing is like is for people like me. I sit in a place like this, and I like that's all I do, right? Like it's
Fair.
but eh, but yeah, he like these guys were just like honest people. Were just like like Dan. He just wanted to like teach people how to um how to be a helper in life. Whether it was like being firearm capable to like medicine. And then I saw some of those classes, and it was like hard to fill in this like training school that they were in. Or most of the times it was like, oh, like I'm around, I'm like, why is there only 5 people in the class? Like why isn't there 20 or 30 people, right? um and it like the education was better than any stop the bleed class that I took personally in the past. So like, and it was 3 days long, it was comprehensive, he was like such a great instructor. And then I see his, sorry Dan, I saw his website, I saw his stuff, and I'm like, gosh, this is horrible. Like, what can I do to help these
Dang.
guys?
Come
Like
on,
he
Dan.
has a baby on, like he has a baby on the way. Like, what? This is all
Yeah.
you do in your life? Like, you don't have another part, like a full time job? He's like, no, I'm a firearms instructor and I teach
Uh,
medicine, or
medical.
TCCC
Yeah.
medical. And then so I'm like, what if I'm able to do something where it's passive revenue for these guys? They get to continue to do what they're doing, which is like they've already done this, right? Like Dave Maynard and his like Warfighter Academy. Like, look, they do this already. But what if I can spend just 3 or 4 days with them, build something online that can actually translate, get people interested in that topic for people who may not have already like. If they already know Dan, great. They can come to me also if they wanted to. If they don't know him, now they're actually I'm exposing a new audience to him, right? They're looking at his videos for a 12 hour, 2 days, 3 days, however long it takes them to like go through these modules, right? At the end of the day. And then they actually meet this person then it also helps the instructors when they're in the live classes, because there's always a time when you're teaching that the first few hours feel very uncomfortable between the student and the instructor, because they're not sure, should I trust this person, right? And it's usually really based off of the instructor itself, or the student, and their comfortability. So ultimately, this actually also kind of shortens that time period, that weirdness, because they feel already comfortable by the time they meet someone like Dan.
Yeah. I think that's powerful because, like you said, it kind of gives them that exposure to, instruction, instructors. I remember the first time I took a course, it wasn't really a course. It was like a license to carry class, which in Virginia is kind of a joke, where you just sit in a class for like 2 hours, and if you know stuff, you know stuff, and if you don't know stuff, now you're asking questions, and now you have the smart aleck, old man in the corner talking about, oh, it's called a casing, it's not a bullet, and it's like it's like kind of a weird
Mm-hmm.
environment. But if you're really timid, or if you're working through some stuff trying to get into firearms, maybe if you have some firearms trauma like yourself, which is very common, extremely common, you're able to kind of get that first touch, that first encounter with actual vetted instruction, versus like what I had to do is I watched like 100 hours of YouTube videos. And you hope you're finding the good information. You're like combing through. Like I learned to do like like podcasting through
Yeah.
YouTube as well. University YouTube is great, but there's a reason people pay for courses. It kind of fast tracks, it cuts through all the BS, all the commercials, all the ads for that people have to put in their videos, and says like, hey, this is the information step by step. You can take notes. You can come back to this module. It's organized. It's really put together, and of course, you're getting knowledge that is reputable, because anybody can start a YouTube channel and pretend to know stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. We're getting some comments talking about how we're happy, like they're grateful that you took time to share your story, because like I said
Thank you.
earlier, that stuff's not easy to share. Even if you've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, yeah, I can share, like it's still not easy to share. So thank you for sharing that, and of course your inspiration for starting this thing. Can we talk about the business model? Because the way I see it, this business might not be here next year. I'm just looking at it from like 1,000 foot view of how it's been for me. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
why what you're doing is different, and it's going to last, and why people should invest their money into it today and next year and the year, and tell their people like, why is this good, and why is it going to kind of work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you're right. Like, and first off, what you were saying about YouTube, right? Like, yeah, you could go through all these things and you have to comb out everything. What makes us very unique is, well, I've done this now for athletes also. Like, educational platforms, whether it's, development on um, how to write like applications, all the way to, how do you use the CRM that, I was marketing at the time, to even, firearms and all this. So what is unique about us is that, I do have this background doing it for athletes in the past. Um, and like building out like there, a company that like certifies people on like tactical breathing and and all that other stuff. So that also helps. And like working with the idea of actually instruction. So we all know different types of instructors. You have people who are new to teaching, right? And you have people who are just teachers for the military, which they already have like a there's usually a foundation that they're already working with, and if you don't do well, there's consequences. And
Right.
then you have like civilian instruction, which, being in UX and UI, and marketing and dealing with like the average everyone, people like me, right? Um, there, it's unpredictable, and like, and the skill sets, like, you either have someone who, is here in the skill set, and someone who's just like, um, like God help them, like
Right.
so, and like, how do you then you don't want it where it's like, oh, it's even, but then like, how do you make it so people can actually learn this in layman's term and make it as easy as possible? And then with visuals and everything else too. So we bring in a lot of the principles on that. And you're wondering if we are, well, you're right. Like startups, as every other company out there, there's always a risk. However, what's unique about us is I have like the instructors that I'm working with. I've been vetting them for this year and a half. Like I take all their live courses first and I work alongside with them to build on their online one and say, okay, how do we translate this perfect, like to more of an online individual one-to-one audience? More importantly, I mean, I've exited three organizations, if not like I like three that I can like really actually claim, and I've like been in tech for like four or five more that have become unicorns. So like finance is not really the issue. It's really like I'm really here just to like I want to help these groups. And ultimately we're funded in multiple ways. So like we have these courses. As I mentioned, I'm also working on the more private sector too, that like if you have clearance, then there are other ones, um, other classes that you would be able to take in the future, right? And also
Okay.
we are partnered with, like we are in talks and also in partnership with some of the gun manufacturers here. So I've been pretty transparent in the way that it is. We rev share with these instructors. Part of our goal is to try and seed in, students into the classes. So if they bought a class through because of Training Arena, then that helps Training Arena a little bit. Um, if they're buying a class on Training Arena, the online classes, majority of the share goes back to the instructors, and then ultimately, like I'm also funding it when these instructors need help with marketing. So that all goes back into the ecosystem itself, and then ultimately we're working with sponsorships and partnerships that like companies that really like to, I mean, we have a compelling situation, and
Sure.
like I hit a very different demographic than, and it's a demographic they've been trying to penetrate for a while. So,
Hmm.
working alongside with these gun manufacturers to actually build courses for them online that that they can either provide for free or through Training Arena, it is
Sure. So
an
there
amazing
there
opportunity. And
there is a
yeah.
business plan here. It's not just like, hey, this would be cool. Let's build a website. So like, who can we get to be on the website? It sounds like there's a bit
No,
of
no,
strategy
actually,
that went into it.
I have a whole list of you. I'm so thankful. I have to tell you, Aaron, like I'm so lucky. We were approached by more instructors than I could ever imagine, and I'm so thankful. And they're like, hey, you know what? I can teach like you know, using oil to like make your own generators and like all this other stuff, right? I'm like, okay, that's great, but you've never actually taught before, and your instruction isn't really that great, so we got to pass on you for that, right? At this time, we've been very selective with the ones that we're working with, and like launching with Dan first. Like we knew for a fact we wanted to work with Dan on that. But yeah, some instructors haven't been able to pass on that. But we got a lot of interest of instructors saying like, oh, I could do land navigation. Oh, I can teach knife fighting. I can teach like foraging mushrooms, right? Like things like it falls in the realm of being self sufficient and being harder to kill. So,
Right. Have you
but
had
yeah,
any?
we. Mhm.
Here's one thing I've got to interrupt for just a second because
Of course.
YouTube is really, really, really funny, and this is like the university YouTube versus the training arena, and I hate to compare you guys so closely, but 99% of my education outside of like high school, right, has been on that platform, and there's a lot of restrictions as a creator in on multiple channels on that platform. we can't show a gun being disassembled. I, a lot of people would have a really hard time showing you, okay, this is how to build an AR-15. This is how to maintenance your guns. Are you going to have courses like that that actually teach very simple, ultra practical at a reasonable price? Because a lot of the courses that you sell, they're not $10. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's an investment, to say the least.
Yeah. And we are building, so with, I, I really want to say their name, but I can't at this time. They're a gun manufacturer.
Like, come
I,
on,
I love them to
let's get the
death.
scoop. Come
They're,
on.
oh, I can't. But we're working with them right now on actually even things like, hey, how do you mount your scope? How do you look for that? Um, what types of, how do you utilize a gun? And again, like just going into the range. So like basic safety courses, we're also working on those too.
Okay, so that's awesome. I can appreciate
And they're
that.
going to be affordable because we want people to actually be able to go to the range and
Yeah,
feel comfortable going into it.
yeah.
So
Oh, fair, and that's good because I know here's something I wanted to address very very briefly. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you became the gun person in the lives of people that maybe you didn't think even cared. Um,
hmm
and I know that feeling, and I felt strong emotion when you were talking about that because I know that feeling of randomly like I go to church and somebody just randomly like older guy, hey, I have a question. So me and my wife have been considering, and they'll start asking me questions. I'm like, who's a good instructor? Can I go? Like all sorts of stuff, and it's like, man, to become the lighthouse in the lives of people that you didn't even know they were looking. Like you had no idea maybe that's a testament that you don't know who's watching you. So be mindful to be
yeah.
great on purpose so that they can kind of catch on to that, maybe catch a little bit of the light. And I'm just so happy that people who traditionally would have just kind of maybe they would have thought about it and they would have just dismissed the side. It's too much trouble. I don't know who to go talk to. I don't know anybody. Oh, do I have to go to a range? Like, how far is that? How much does it cost? What do I need to do? Do I need special gear? Like, for you being that person that people can approach
Yeah.
to be approachable, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Like, thank you for continuing to do that. And on the wider scale of
Oh,
the
thank
training
you.
arena. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, people were coming at like I hadn't talked to one of my colleagues for like 6 years,
Six
and
years.
they asked, and I was like, hey, clearly I was not that memorable. I mean, I was memorable enough for them to reach out to me. They've done like amazing. They're in one of those FANG companies, and I'm really proud of them.
Yeah.
They're amazing in there. But
Yeah.
it shows that like, oh wait, maybe even if like your colleagues that many years ago didn't really reach out to you, um, lost touch with you, but they're like watching what you're doing anyways. So
Right.
even when you're doing something like this, like I am so proud to be one of those people that they can come to me and say like, "Hey, I want to buy a firearm. I don't even know where to start." And I'm like, "Well, here's some basic questions to ask." And then
Yeah.
like, "Okay, well, here's the four safety like, or I have people who are like, "Hey, I'm going to go to the range with my friend, but again, I don't want to be stupid."
Yeah.
But YouTube, awesome. You can get all of, as you said, you could get almost all of your information there. Combing through it and recognizing whether or not like it's comprehensive, that's
Hmm.
harder.
Right. You can
Um,
waste a lot of time.
and I, like, mhm. And then also like if you were like me in the circumstance of like asking the one person I knew that owned guns, and she like turns out introduced me to the person that was like a joke to almost all like
Right.
instructors. They're like, hey, this is a bad case of exactly the type of instructors we don't want instructing in
Right.
this gun world. Um, and like, oh my gosh, how would it have been if I worked with him? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I want to take 1 second if we're able to and just thank everyone who's tuned in. And of course, if you are a member over on locals, excuse me, if you're a member over on locals, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for supporting the work. If you would just take a second, look at the pinned link in the live feed and or go ahead and check out the video description. There's actually a link that we're going to be able to use to head over there after we finish the YouTube stream. We're probably going to wrap the YouTube stream up in about 10 minutes. So head over to the locals link. It's pinned comment. Create a free account. Use code free to get 30 days free over there if you want to interact, or if you just want to just watch the stream without actually becoming a member, you can do that as well. And also, if you're on the podcast side, please leave us a review. Please do that. Even if you hate us, like, just take the time to share your thoughts. I would love to know how I can make this thing a little bit better for you, especially as we start to expand and do other things, because we have some stuff coming up. I can't tell you about it yet. Just like April's talking about how she can't tell us who she's about to be working with, and I don't hate her for saying that, but I'm hurting. I thought we had something special going on, and I can't tell you guys exactly what we're going to do, but I'm so excited. And we're going to be working with some really, really cool people to bring you guys some concepts and some information that is really, really good. And maybe we'll do something with April. I doubt it, but maybe one of these days. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I do have up on the screen a QR code for one of our biggest supporters, Obsidian Tactics. If you need tactical gear that we really can't talk about on YouTube, check them out. QR code, just screenshot it, put it in your little QR code scanner. It'll take you there. Use code Armed Atlas. It gets you free shipping. So kind of like Amazon, only better, because all this stuff there is actually good, because you can buy counterfeit items on Amazon that will break as soon as you use them. And if that ever happened to you with Obsidian Tactics, I would pay for it myself and make sure you were good, because I trust their stuff. Like, they're coming from reputable places and stuff. Anyways, I want to get back to the show because April is just killing it, providing amazing information, and of course, sharing a really, really powerful story. If you didn't know, now you know. Let's get back to it. April, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. And like I said, in a few minutes we're going to wrap up and go over to local. So if you guys have questions right now in the live stream, make sure that you fire them in, and we'll try to grab them before we go over there. I think we're going to talk about aliens or something. And
Wait.
yeah, but let's talk about let's go back to the business plan for just a second, because you mentioned that, like, money's not an issue. You have supporters, you have sponsors, you have brands that want to partner and provide, the monetary means to keep a website going, because website building isn't free. Um, Maintaining a website server or whatever, and all the different things, you know more about it than me. None of that is free. And even working with, getting the upgrades to the site and all that stuff, none of it's free. Are you primarily funding this, or did you get investors? Like, where is the money coming from? Follow the money.
Right now,
Can you tell
yeah.
us?
Right now it's it's right now it's privately funded.
About to say
So I
publicly
have
traded. That's crazy.
no, not yet, not yet.
Yeah,
And it probably never will be, right?
I hope
Part of
not.
the data
Yeah.
considerations that we have, like, we probably won't. Um, we have been in talks with some investors, like additional investors. Right now, it's really just the co-founders and I. Fortunately, like, I mean, you see two keyboards and a computer, another computer right here. Like, I'm tech savvy. I do all the websites. I do all the I vet all the platforms that we work with. We have some amazing partners that we like work with, actually, onto working with the trading arena. So a lot of that is funded by the co-founders at the moment, and you know
Yeah. Well, that's
that,
good.
like, fortunately, I like, transparently, our overhead isn't high at all,
Well, that's
which
good, and that's
it works
wise.
out really well.
Yeah, and
And
that's
then,
probably why I've
mhm.
survived as
And
long as
like
I
being
have,
able to
because I
again
keep it
help
low.
these.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and that's important, right? Like, if you can do your own editing, if you could do your own content, and you can do your own marketing, and here it is, right? Like,
Mhm.
your overhead is fairly low, but the mission is important at the end of the
Right.
day. And then
Right.
also, like, these live events and everything else too. Having an events background makes it so easy. Like, I do this in my sleep sometimes, literally. I
So I wake up in sweats. Dang, that was crazy. Do we do that? We did that.
I actually, it's pretty embarrassing. I started dating recently, right? Like knowing that there's a separation in my thing. I remember waking up at like 5 in the morning, just like the last week or two, and I was like, "What are you using for your e-commerce?" Like with like this other person, and like being drilling them on like uh, well, metaphorically and not dirty, their back end, like the back end infrastructure. I'm like, who's hosting your
You
websites?
know,
Who's hosting your thing? I'm like,
it would
well,
have been
hold on,
fine
hold on.
until you said not dirty, and then it's like,
No, no, no. And
ooh.
yeah, look, well, listen, I look, look, we all kept it PG. Because yeah, we just kept it PG. And
Hmm.
the thing is though, I did like, I went and asked. I'm like, what are you doing for the front of the system? And like they have a shop and everything else too. I'm like, gosh, who the hell is doing your merchandising? Like, no, 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 let me help you with that. So yeah, no, I do this in my sleep. I literally
Yeah,
like I think about this. And all this is easy for me. That financially, it's not an issue for us. We
that's good.
also, we are working with certain investors that private investors at the moment that like we know for a fact do
Hmm.
well, and most of it is driven through sponsorships at the end of the
That's
day.
good. Well, that is fantastic because at the end of the day, I want this to last. I don't want this to be like so many conversations that I've had with people where it's like, oh, next year, I haven't heard from. Where are they? Let me look them up. Their Instagram is gone. Their website is gone. And I don't want to like put anything like bad juju into the universe. I don't believe in juju, anyways. You know, um,
Yeah.
but it's like, man, I want to see you win. What's the plan? And it sounds like you have a great plan. You have people who are willing to sacrifice. You are sacrificing yourself to make it happen. And like you said earlier, the overhead isn't tremendous. So you can really do the personal investment, the time investment. Now, the question is when you
Mhm.
get tired and burnt out, who's going to be able to pick up the slack for you? Like who does April go to? Because everybody's going to April, right? Everybody's going to April. Who do
Yeah.
you go to?
Ooh, for majority of this, I have my network.
Yeah.
I have a very strong network of people that have share the same values and moral systems that that understand like, hey, we're not just trying to sell something. There's really a mission that we want to do. We want to be able to help these veterans and their brands at the end of the day. This
Hmm.
is this is more than me at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I do have two other co-founders who have they share the same vision as me on this, and they're just as passionate. I have a very technical guy who can like build spreadsheets to tell you exactly like the ballistics amounts and stuff like that, right? Like he
Wow.
he is our like expert when it comes to this type of stuff, and he's like, well, when this person said, that there's an arm got stuck in the wall, like, but the bomb type of, he would actually like go and do the math, right, and be like, actually, I don't think it checks out because of this, like,
All right.
and he's
They
like my
do calculus
spreadsheets
in their
guy,
sleep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then I have like a video production person who is just like who's just killer, and he's great at telling stories, and that's exactly like what he does for us, right?
Yeah. Video production
Um,
is the most expensive part of most of this stuff. At least in my mind, it
yeah,
is because I do video production. And anytime someone asks me for pricing, they're like, oh, I didn't know it was that much. So
yeah, and it takes a lot of time and work.
it
Fortunately,
does.
the both of us were like have experience in that. Like in my past, in the Fortune 500 companies that I worked for, I launched the Sony A7 cameras as part of
Heck
my
yeah.
campaign. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I know
You're
like
my
dear to
hero.
hear in my heart. Like those were
I have a Sony right here, right
it
now.
was
So
my last project
yeah.
with Sony.
Oh man, that's so cool.
See, me too. I,
Yeah, I'm about to
and
say that's
actually,
why your image looks
my
so good.
webcam is actually a Sony.
I knew it. I knew it. Just
Yeah,
it looked
it's
too
another
good to
Sony
not
A7.
be. Yeah, that's freaking dope. Yeah,
And
I guess we got to
but
go
yeah,
through
like
that list.
I worked with them for quite a bit, and because of that, I like we already had the gear. This is
Yeah,
my production thing there too. So, and we all have the skill sets for it. So again, low overhead, um, we're very fortunate. I am so lucky that there are so many people. I have mentors who've helped me in the past. Again, I've also helped athletes build out um, their training programs in the past, and so that like being able to talk to those guys and say like, hey, what are our best practices there? And if April was not here today, the company would still be running.
That is the question, because one of these days you're going to want to pick up another project. Like, you're too skilled and too talented just to do one thing forever, in my mind, anyways. Um, and what does
I've
that
been told
succession
that.
plan look like? I don't want to ask you that right now, because that's something that I think you're going to have to work out, and really flesh out. And I don't want you to commit to it on camera right now. But
Oh, actually, I will tell you right now. Actually, we do have a plan on this. So I I am extremely like on the side. I kind of mentioned this before,
mhm,
helping the veterans and their brand. Like, yeah, okay, training arena is awesome. Like, and if I can provide this information, like, there's a few missions going on at the same time for me,
mhm,
right? Mission number one, make make these this information as accessible for people as possible. Mission number two is really helping our veteran brands, helping them and their like families. Like, listen, at the end of the day, they've sacrificed. Like, no matter what people will say about, oh, America and wars and like what, I don't give a shit. At the end of the day, like, if you like these people sacrifice time, lives, and memories away from families, everything, right, for a while, and especially the like people in special operations, they've had to be they gave up their time for America. And a lot of us haven't done a lot back for them. And when they come back here, we do a really shitty job. Yes, there's veteran services, but at the end of the day, like, why are they building these brands where they're teaching courses? Like, it's trauma based to a certain extent because it's something that they're used to, and this is all that they can have. The like the private sector does not translate. Oh, okay, if you're a Navy SEAL, what does that mean? Like, can you be a project manager at Google? I don't know. Potentially, like, if you have like clearance, but most of the time they're like, well, like, how does repelling and helping blah blah blah, or like how does room clearing help with this? And like, no, 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 we manage this and build out these, and they have different types of like way of talking about it that the corporate world doesn't understand. And if you weren't exposed to the military, you you would be like, okay, so you're a military member, you must be a jarhead, right? Like, so a lot of them can't find jobs, so they build these training schools for themselves. And now you see a lot of veteran like based training schools, all on firearms, all teaching kind of the same thing over and over again. And for me, like, I see this and I'm like, wow, this really sucks. Like, they're trying to find an honest way to live back into the civilian world, and we haven't actually provided them the skill sets to do more or expand or get out of that, to a certain extent. So why don't we elevate them? Why don't we actually push the students to them? Because at the end of the day, the ones that are only successful, they might have like a buddy here and there that like, oh, I know how to make like Instagram reels that are cool, and then they call them the head of marketing. You know, I'm not saying like most of them actually have done a great job, um, but the schools are empty at the end of the day. And I'm not fixing the biggest problem, which is like, okay, how do we translate people over? But from their time in the military to retirement. But I can ease what I can by giving them this passive revenue, on their side, and also helping them consult on their brand, um, on my side. So I can only just provide them the things that I'm actually really good at, that I could do in my sleep for them. And then ultimately, I want to work with, like, I have a passion in working with, these nonprofit organizations like the Overwatch Collective, who, they're a network of therapists. They're actually like in my backyard,
I was
like
about
not
to ask
literal
you
backyard, but they're like
about
in my
mental health.
facility. My yeah,
Yeah, I was about to ask you about mental
yeah.
health, and if you have any concepts or ideas on how your platform, or if your platform is even geared in such a way where it could accommodate any sort of, I don't know, like, hey, this is self therapy, a meditation. I'm not a big
Yeah,
meditation guy, but like, can the training arena, can it house any sort of therapeutic? I don't even know how to say it.
absolutely. Yes. This is something that we want to work with. So, you know, I this is premature, but I am working. I would love to explore a conversation with like Greg Grogan, who runs the Overwatch Collective, right? Like he has this massive base of therapists that are ready to work alongside with first responders and special operations group, where they provide free therapy sessions that are um, not tied to like TRICARE and everything else too, right? So it's a two for a win, and we've been like friends, so we like forward traffic back and forth to each other like on Instagram and stuff. But ultimately, I do want to work with organizations like his to put some of their resources onto our platform and vice versa. And this allows people that like, a, if you're not a special forces, if you're not a first responder, if you're not if you're not, sorry, I keep saying special forces, but if you're not in the military, if you're not a first responder, firefighter, police, then you can donate to organizations like the Overwatch Collective um, to help these people, because ultimately, um, yeah, they there are services available, and yet sometimes they're worried about what type of things get logged and tied to their name, concerning that, okay, yeah, maybe you've served and you're out of the military, but then you use veteran services and then they put a label on you. Then, if you're applying later in the FBI or the CIA, part of like the GRS group or whatever it might be, then, you may not be eligible later on, or Blackwater, like all those different types of groups. And it's like, oh, well, you have PTSD, so therefore, sorry, we can't have you there. So they get nervous. Not to be able to use these type of services. But yeah, we are actually like, we would love to work with groups like the Overwatch Collective to provide that in our platform.
Excellent. April, um, we're going to transition over to locals to talk about aliens or
Aliens.
all the different people that you've ever worked for, including MI6, CIA, Mossad, stuff like that. But can you just really quickly let people know how they can follow April Wong and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You could find us at trainingarena.com, or you could just go to aprilwong.com. You can see all my history and everything else too. I'm on Instagram, on aprilwong.com, or the Training Arena.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching or listening to Caustic Conversations. My name is Aaron, and I'm just incredibly grateful to have had this time with you. I know there's a few of you who watched all the way to the end. There's some of you who had to kind of come and go just because life. And of course, if you're listening on podcast and you made it all the way here, please send me an email, aaron@costlymedia.com, and let me know if you enjoy the show or if there's somebody that you would love to see on the show later on, or if you're like, hey, listen, we need to get April on every single week because I feel like there's just so much more for her to say. She's nodding her head in agreement. Yeah, I see her right now. No, now she's laughing at me. No, yeah, she is nodding. Here we go. Guys, there's a little QR code in the bottom left-hand corner. That'll take you straight to our armedatlas.locals.com. That's our members website where you can actually watch the entirety of the live stream, because there's like a 15 to 45-minute section that we do outside of YouTube. We can show guns. We can talk about things that are taboo on YouTube. We can do all this stuff. Thank you so much for being here. Scan that QR code or check the link in the description or top pinned comment or whatever it is. If you're on podcast, it's in the show notes. And let's get to it. All right, guys. As always, keep it costly.